a terrifying trailhead horror unfolds at Dry Ridge, where an immersive ASMR journey spirals into psychological wilderness terror with every haunting bell that rings. You're listening to ASMR 404Found. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I've always been drawn to the quiet places, the ones nobody talks about. The kind of trailheads where the signs are cracked, where the trees grow just a little too close together, and where you don't get any cell service once you've passed the first mile. Dry Ridge Trailhead wasn't even on most maps anymore. I only found it because of a dusty little pamphlet tucked between an old hiking guide at a garage sale. No date, no author, just a faded photos of a wooden sign that read Dry Ridge Trailhead, with the words Wilderness Unchanged underneath. Something about that tagline haunted me more than it should have. I planned my trip like I always do. Solo, one pack, a week's worth of food, water purifiers, emergency beacon, though I wasn't expecting it to work out there. I drove up from Portland, and by the time I hit the nearest town, Elk Grove, the sun was going down. It was one of those towns with a single gas station, a diner, and maybe 3 stop signs. I pulled into the gas station just as the last of the daylight slipped behind the mountains. The guy behind the counter was mid-60s, eyes sunken, skin dry like paper. He didn't even look up until I dropped a bottle of water and a protein bar on the counter. "You're not from around here," he said, voice low, the kind of tone that makes you pay attention. "No, just passing through," I replied casually. "Looking to hike Dry Ridge." He stopped scanning, looked up, eyes fixing on mine. "Dry Ridge." His voice was quieter now. "Yeah, figured I'd spend a couple nights off-grid. Looks peaceful." He didn't blink. "That trail's been closed since '89. I laughed. "Well, someone forgot to tell the Forest Service. There's still a sign off Old Mill Road." He didn't laugh, just stared. Then he muttered something I couldn't quite catch. I asked him to repeat it. He leaned in. "You hike Dry Ridge. You don't come back the same, if you come back at all." That's when I noticed his hands. The skin around his knuckles looked burned, or maybe frostbitten, hard to tell. Deep purple scars ran across both palms. I smiled politely, grabbed my stuff, and thanked him. As I headed out the door, he called out without turning round, "Don't follow the bells, no matter what you hear." I didn't sleep well that night. Parked off the service road a quarter-mile from the trailhead, and laid in the back of my Jeep with a blanket and a pocket knife under my pillow. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to something brushing against the driver's side window. Not tapping, brushing like a twig, or fingers dragging slowly. There was nothing there when I looked. No wind, no animals, just silence. I started the hike at dawn. The trailhead was overgrown but visible. Moss clung to everything, and the deeper I went, the more the trees leaned in, their branches interlocking above me. The sound changed too. Birds didn't chirp like usual. Instead, I kept hearing what I thought was whistling, distant, thin, almost like wind through a pipe. At about mile 3, I saw the first bell. It hung from a tree branch by a rusted chain. Small, tarnished silver. No markings. It didn't move. I wouldn't have noticed it if the sun hadn't glinted off the metal. I stood there for a long time, just staring. Something about it made my chest feel tight. I pulled out my phone. Signal, of course, and took a picture. But the screen went black the second I tapped the shutter. Wouldn't even turn back on until I walked another half-mile. The deeper I went, the more bells I saw. All of them the same. Hanging in silence. I made camp at mile 5, near a creek that wasn't on any map. The water ran backward. Ply. I tested it 3 times, even recorded it on my GoPro. When I checked the footage later, it just showed an empty forest. That night, I heard the bells, not clanging, ringing, soft and slow, like someone was walking through the trees with them tied to their boots. I got out of my tent and scanned the woods with my headlamp. Nothing, no wind, no animals. But the sound kept coming, always just out of sight. I stayed up all night with my knife in hand. On day 2, I started seeing the trees. I know that sounds stupid, but I mean seeing them. Faces, not in a pareidolia kind of warial faces, carved into the bark, mouths open, wide eyes hollow. Some looked surprised, others looked like they were screaming. All of them bleeding sap, thick like molasses. One had a scarf nailed into its face. The fabric fluttered when I passed, even though the air was still. That evening, I found a clearing. Dead center was a pile of bones, clean, arranged in a spiral. Some were animal, some weren't. I don't scare easy, but my stomach dropped when I saw a finger bone with a wedding ring still on it. I turned around right there, decided to get the hell out. That's when I realized the trail was gone. I had marked trees every quarter-mile with neon tape, all of it gone, every strip. Even the bark looked smooth, untouched. I checked my compass. The needle spun. That night, I lit a fire. It crackled louder than normal, like the wood was wet, even though it wasn't. I wrapped myself in my blanket and sat with my back to a tree, facing the woods. That's when I saw her, a woman standing just beyond the firelight. Long black hair, pale skin, a red dress stained with mud. She wasn't moving, just watching. Her arms hung limp at her sides, and her mouth was open wide like she was gasping. I didn't blink, didn't breathe. Then she took one step forward, and all the bells rang at once. That sound, dozens of bells ringing in perfect unison, hit something primal inside me. I ran dot, no pack, no flashlight. Just ran into the dark woods, barefoot. The bells followed me, always behind, never closer, just loud enough to keep me running. I tripped somewhere near a ravine and slid down into cold water, hit my head, woke up hours later with mud in my mouth and my ankles swollen to hell above me. Hanging from a branch was another bell. This one had writing. It said, "Stop running. You're almost home." I didn't touch the bell, didn't even let my eyes linger on it too long. Instead, I dragged myself out of that ravine, my ankle twisted and useless, mud soaking through every layer. The forest was quiet again, but not the peaceful kind of quiet. This was the kind that pressed down on your eardrums, the kind that felt like it was listening. I started crawling in what I thought was a straight line, pulling myself by the elbows, ankles screaming with each shift. Trees seemed to sway even, though there was no wind. Their trunks leaned toward me like they were watching, and every time I blinked, it felt like they leaned a little closer. A few yards ahead, I found a wooden sign nailed into a fallen tree. The wood was gray and dry, almost flaking apart. It read, "Welcome back." I didn't remember ever seeing it before. Underneath, in newer, jagged carvings, someone had scratched another message into the wood. It said, "Where do you think you're going?" I wanted to scream. Not from pain, from that growing feeling that I was being herded, guided, not just lost in the woods, but being led by something that didn't walk on 2 feet, something that didn't need a path to follow me. I kept moving until the trees opened into a small clearing. I recognized it. Somehow, I'd ended up right back where I'd camped the first night. Same burned logs from the fire I'd made. Same arrangement of stones. And hanging from the lowest branch of a tree, just beyond the clearing, was another bell. This one had writing. Small, etched letters, barely visible unless the light hit just right. It said, "You were chosen. Accept it." I turned and walked the other direction. Didn't care what direction it was. North, south, whatever. I just needed to move. After what felt like an hour, I found the creek again. Same one with water flowing uphill. My reflection was gone. The water moved, but it didn't show anything. Just a black surface, rippling under invisible hands. Then I heard a voice. It was mine. "Help. I'm lost." Same pitch, same breath pattern, same strain I had when I first realized I couldn't find my way out. I froze. The voice called again. "Help, please. I'm here." It came from the trees behind me. I turned slowly, every hair on my arms standing straight up. There was no one, bare, just the windless forest and that voice calling again, using my exact words. "Please, I'm hurt. I need help." I didn't reply, just backed away, heart thudding so loud I could feel it in my jaw. The voice got louder, closer, still mimicking me. Then it laughed, not a human laugh, a hollow, broken sound that cracked midway through like a tape warping in a dying cassette player. I ran, didn't even think. Boom, just sprinted into the trees, branches tearing at my arms, mud sucking at my feet. Eventually, I stumbled out onto what looked like an old path, overgrown and half-buried, but unmistakably man-made. I followed it, limping now, teeth clenched from the pain. The forest was changing again. The trees here were gray, some hollowed out, others swollen and bloated like something was growing inside the bark. I passed one that had ropes hanging from the limbs, 5 ropes, all frayed, with small silver bells tied at the ends. They swung gently, not from wind, from breath. I didn't stop, just kept going. I found a cabin not long after, half sunken into the earth, barely upright, moss climbing up the walls and overtaking the roof. The windows were black. Inside, it smelled like mold and metal. I opened the door. There was a table. On the table were 6 journals, all bound in leather, all water-stained and cracked. I opened the top one and scanned the first few pages. Each journal belonged to someone else. Different handwriting, different names, same story. Each hiker described the bells, the faces in the trees, the voices mimicking them, the strange symbols carved into bark that disappeared by morning. The feeling of being watched, herded, broken down piece by piece. One entry chilled me deeper than the rest. I tried cutting down one of the trees. The sap bled red. The face on the trunk screamed without moving. The bell in my bag shattered. Another wrote, "I saw myself last night." It smiled. I screamed. It opened its mouth and 100 voices poured out, none of them mine. And then the last page. It's not the forest that's haunted. It's me. The moment I stepped off the trail, it got inside. My voice, my thoughts, it's replacing me, one sound at a time. I think when it's finished, I won't even know I was ever real. I dropped the journal and backed away. Then the radio in the corner of the cabin clicked on. I hadn't touched it, just static at first. Then a voice, low and calm. "If you're hearing this, you've passed the threshold. There is no map. There is no exit. There is only the trade. Stay long enough and you'll understand. Stay too long and you'll forget what you were." I bolted out of the cabin and kept running. Branches whipped across my face. My ankle throbbed with every step. I didn't care. I ran until my lungs gave out, and when I collapsed, face first into wet moss, I heard bells ringing above me, hundreds of them, all in perfect harmony. The kind of sound that made your bones vibrate and your heart falter. I looked up. Hanging from every tree was a bell, no chain, no hook, just floating there. Each one turned toward me, like they were watching, and underneath the largest one, standing tall between 2 pale pines, was that woman again, the one in the red dress. Her mouth moved now. No words, just shapes. She raised her hand and pointed at me. Then she smiled, and I felt my voice leave my throat. Not like I couldn't speak, like it was taken, pulled out of me and placed somewhere else, somewhere cold and hollow. The forest around me breathed, and I realized that trees weren't just trees. They were filled with the ones who never made it out, and now they were making room for me. I don't remember falling asleep, but I woke up inside a tree, not a cabin, not a shelter. A tree, hollowed out, damp, smooth inside like it had been polished. My body was wedged between the roots, surrounded by bark that pulsed like veins beneath the surface. There was no door, no crack in the wood, just me and the deep, muffled thrum of something ancient pressing in around me. When I screamed, the bark vibrated, not from echo, but response. The tree was listening. I pressed my hands against the inside. It was warm. From outside I heard whispers. Again, not mine, this time. New ones, voices in different tones. Men, women, children, all tangled together in a low chant. They spoke without language, but I understood anyway. The forest wasn't haunted. It was feeding. Every bell, every whisper, every reflection was a mouth. Every mimic was a net, and I had already been swallowed. The bark around me began to crack, not breaking apart, but opening, like jaws parting. I fell forward into ash. The forest had changed again. There were no trees anymore, only stumps, blackened, hollowed, stretching endlessly in every direction. Above, the sky was wrong, flat, not like a dome, but like paper taped over light, and across that false sky were shadows walking in slow, rhythmic patterns. Their limbs moved, wrong, too long, too smooth, no joints. I stood and limped toward the nearest stump. Inside was a face, eyes open, mouth sealed shut with bark. It was still breathing. The face looked like mine, not dissimilar, identical. I turned and ran without a direction, just movement. And that's when I saw the fire tower, an old one, steel frame, cabin at the top, wooden stairs winding upward in a zigzag that stood tall over the lifeless stumps, untouched. Some part of me believed it was safe. That was a mistake. I climbed anyway. Each step groaned like ribs cracking under pressure at the top. The door was open. Inside was a single chair, facing a wall covered in maps, hundreds of them, hand-drawn, scribbled over, all showing different versions of Dry Ridge. None of them had exits. Every trail looped into itself. Some folded over into spirals. Others ended in symbols, bells, eyes, teeth. Pinned to the center of the wall was a photograph. It was me, standing, bit the trailhead, smiling, next to someone I didn't recognize. A ranger. He looked half decomposed, like a taxidermy version of himself. Written under the photo were the words, "New trailkeeper approved." I backed out of the cabin. I hadn't agreed to anything. That's when the bells started again. Not just one, thousands. The sound hit me, like pressure pushing into my skull, vibrating behind my eyes. I screamed, but no sound came out. Below the tower, the stumps moved. They weren't stumps at all. They were heads. Hundreds of human heads, buried up to the neck. Their mouths opened in perfect unison and sang through the bells. The sound was thick with grief. It was a song of hunger, of invitation. The sky split, a clean tear straight across. From it poured black dust that swirled, like smoke but never touched the ground. And walking beneath that rip was the woman in the red dress. Only now I could see her face fully. It was made of other faces stitched together, eye sockets layered, teeth stacked behind skin. When she opened her mouth, I saw more bells inside her throat. Swinging with her breath, she lifted one hand, snapped her fingers, and everything stopped. Total stillness. Then a voice behind me, a voice I hadn't heard since I was 12 years old. It was my brother. He died in a river when we were kids, but there he was, standing at the base of the tower, calling my name. I didn't question it. I ran down the stairs, halfway down the metal steps, turned to bone. I kept running. The forest returned in flashes, ash to pine, pine to ash. The sky twisted like fabric wrung out. He waited just ahead, still 12, still in that wet red jacket. He smiled and said, "It's not about you. It never was, but you'll do." Then he burst into flames. No scream, no smoke, just vanished behind. Where he stood, the trailhead sign appeared again. Dry Ridge Trailhead. Same cracked wood. Same slogan. Wilderness unchanged. Only this time, a second line was carved underneath. You are now part of the unseen path. I stepped toward it. Then something inside me stopped. A tiny voice buried deep beneath everything else. My own voice, saying, "No." I turned around, and she was there again. The red-dressed woman. She lunged. I threw my pack into her face and ran. Ran through brush, through roots, through the mud and the stench of everything that tried to keep me. I tripped once, fell hard, heard something snap in my leg. Didn't matter. Kept moving. The forest didn't chase anymore. It didn't have to. It had already marked me. I broke through, tore the tree line sometime near dusk, collapsed onto asphalt. Cried for the first time in years. I woke up in a ranger's truck. They said they found me crawling out of the woods, 3 miles from the old Dry Ridge sign. The trail was closed, condemned, no. One had hiked there legally in over 30 years. I asked if they'd gone in. The ranger, a young woman, shook her head and said they never stepped foot past the old stone post. When I asked why, she said, "No one comes back the same, if they come back at all." I nodded. Didn single quotes to say a word. Back home now, I hear bells at night, not loud. Just one dot, soft dot, constant dot. My phone records random static when I sleep, and in that static there's a voice. Sometimes it's mine, sometimes it's hers, but lately it's starting to sound more like someone else. Someone new, someone who's still out there, following the bells, walking into the forest with a backpack and a smile, looking for peace, and never realizing what Dry Ridge really is. A gate, a mirror, a mouth, and it's always hungry. They say if you hike far enough past Ash Creek Trailhead, the forest starts whispering things only you can hear. I never believed that crap. I was just looking for solitude. My job was falling apart. My relationship had already flatlined, and the world had been screaming in my ears for months. I needed a place where nobody knew my name, and the air didn't smell like burnt wires and gasoline. Ash Creek wasn't even on most maps anymore. The trail had been removed from public listings after a wildfire a decade ago. But I'd read online about how parts of it had survived. Hikers shared coordinates, grainy photos, stories that felt more like urban legends. People claimed to see pins in the trees, not animals, shapes. Some said they heard singing. It sounded perfect. I parked at the edge of a gravel pull-off, 2 miles from the old ranger station. No reception, no signs, just a rusted gate and a split log marker with faded lettering that read, Ash Creek Trailhead in flaking white paint. I felt it the moment I stepped onto the trail. That HEAVINESS. Not fear. Not yet. Just wait. Like the air was thicker here. Like something unseen was paying attention. The trees were tall, pine and fir, mostly. Dense, too dense. They leaned over the path like they were trying to hide it. Moss crawled up their trunks, covering everything like velvet rot. The ground was soft, not from rain, but from age. Layers of pine needles and soil that hadn't seen sunlight in years. About 2 miles in, I found a fork that wasn't marked on my map to the right. The trail continued into what looked like a narrow canyon, overgrown and darker than the rest. Bubble of the forest. To the left, a second path climbed uphill, barely visible, choked with roots and lichen. I felt my feet drift left without thinking. The climb was slow. At the top, I found the remnants of an old firewatch post. Just the foundation now. Broken concrete slabs. A rusted railing curled in on itself like a dead spider. And carved into the largest slab were 3 words. Leave the names at first. I thought it was graffiti. Some weird local tradition. But under the words, someone had scratched dozens of names into the concrete. Some faded, some fresh, all written with sharp, deliberate marks. One of them matched my last name, spelled exactly. That was the first time I hesitated. I stood there a while, running my hand over the letters, trying to convince myself it was just coincidence. My last name isn't rare, but it isn't common either. And the spelling was dead on. I didn't sleep that night. I made camp near the edge of a dried-up creek bed. My tent pressed up against a low ridge. The forest was so quiet it felt like being underwater. No bugs, no owls. Just the sound of my own breath. Then the pines began to move. Not sway, move, not sway. Move, not them from inside my tent. Shadows shifting behind the canvas. Slow and deliberate. Branches bending against no wind. Trunks creaking in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. And then I heard it. My name, not shouted, whispered, close. Right. Outside I unzipped the tent and shined my light. Nothing but trees, moss, pine needles. But something had been there. There were footprints in the dirt, barefoot, human, leading up to my tent, but none leading away. The next morning, I broke camp without eating. I hiked for 5 hours straight, deeper into the canyon. The pines grew tighter, more twisted. Some had ropes hanging from their limbs. Others had marks carved into their bark circles with vertical lines through them. The same symbol repeated, be over and over. I started seeing things in the corners of my eyes at first. It was just flashes, a figure ducking behind a trunk, movement in the brush. But by midday, they weren't just flashes anymore. I saw a woman standing 30 feet off the trail, She wore a black shawl, her hair long and stringy, face turned toward the ground. I called out. She didn't move. I took a step toward her, and she vanished. No sound, no movement, gone. I told myself I was dehydrated. I drank from my canteen, splashed my face, kept moving. But then I found the cabin. Old, tilted sideways like the ground beneath it had given up. The door hung open. Inside, it was empty except for a wooden chair and a rotted table. Carved into the table was a sentence. The forest does not forget. I didn't know what that meant. I still don't. But I sat down in that chair and stayed there until night fell, and when the darkness came, the forest began to hum. Not a sound you could explain. Not wind, not animals. A low, steady vibration in the trees, like thousands of voices trapped just beneath the bark. I closed my eyes, and I saw them. Bodies hanging from branches, mouths open, eyes stitched shut with thread made of pine needles. All of them facing me when I opened my eyes. The cabin was gone. I was sitting on a stump in the middle of the trail. No table, no chair, just me and the trees, and the sound of someone walking barefoot behind me. I didn't move. I could feel it standing behind me, bare feet shifting on pine needles. The faint, wet sound of skin on bark, breathing that wasn't mine. I waited for it to touch me, for the cold rush of fingers on my shoulder, but nothing happened. When I finally turned around, I was alone again. No prints, no shadow, but something had changed. The trail looked unfamiliar. The pines didn't line up the way they had. The slope of the ground curved the wrong direction. I should have been able to see the ridge I camped against the night before, but now it was gone. I started walking. I checked my compass. The needle spun in slow, lazy circles. The air was thicker than it had been, harder to breathe. The silence had weight to it. My footsteps no longer echoed. It was like the earth had swallowed every sound. Around mile 6, I saw the second cabin. This one wasn't ruined. It looked brand new. Fresh lumber, clean windows, door slightly ajar. Inside there were candles, all lit, arranged in a circle on the floor. In the center of the circle was a photograph. I stepped closer. It was me. Same jacket, same boots, but the eyes were wrong. They were open too wide, and the smile on my face looked forced, like something stretching skin that didn't fit right beneath. The photo was a small carving in the floorboards. He took the forest in. Now the forest takes him. I backed out slowly and shut the door. But when I turned around, I was no longer in the same place. The path had vanished. There were no trees, only graves. Hundreds of them, wooden markers, each one carved with a name and a single bell hanging above. No wind, but the bells trembled. A low chime came from all sides. I walked among them, reading each name. I recognized some from the concrete slab at the Firewatch ruins. Then I saw it, my own name, freshly carved, no date of death, just the name and a symbol beneath it. A pine tree with an eye inside the trunk. I heard a sound from below, not beneath the grave, beneath the ground itself, like something turning over in the soil. I ran, didn't think, didn't stop. The forest returned as I sprinted, trees rising around me, dirt under my boots again. But they weren't normal pines anymore. Their trunks were split open vertically, and inside each one was a person. Faces slack, eyes rolled back, mouths pressed to the bark like the trees had swallowed them. Mid-dash screamed, their breath steamed against the cold wood. I tripped on a root and slammed into the ground. My head cracked against a stone, and stars danced across my vision. I rolled onto, put my back and saw them. The woman from before, and others. Men, children, old women, all dressed in black, all barefoot. They stood in a circle round me. Their eyes were bleeding, not red dot black dot, thick and slow, trailing down their cheeks in silence. One of them stepped forward, a boy no older than 10. He leaned down and whispered something into my ear. Only, it wasn't my ear. It was the part of me I keep locked away. The part that dreams and remembers and forgets. He said, "You made a sound when you stepped off the trail." The forest heard it. It never forgets a voice. Then he opened his mouth wider than any human should have been able to. Inside, there were pine needles instead of teeth. He screamed, but the sound came out like wind through 1,000 hollow trunks. I woke in a hollow, curled at the base of a tree. My hands were covered in sap, sticky, black dot. My phone was gone. So was my backpack. All I had was my knife and a single matchbook from a gas station back home. I stood and stumbled forward. Every step felt wrong, like the trail was tilting under me. Then I saw something ahead, a mirror, just hanging from a branch, no frame, no glass. The reflection shimmered like water, and inside it, I saw myself. But I was smiling again. That same smile from the photograph. My reflection raised a hand and pointed behind me. I turned. Nothing there. When I looked back, the mirror was gone. But in its place was a trail marker, freshly painted. Ash Creek Trail, mile 7. I should have been at mile 9. Someone or something was turning me around, looping the trail, bending the rules of space to keep me lost, or maybe to wear me down. It was working. I heard crying up ahead. A woman. I followed the sound for what felt like hours. Finally, I found her. She was curled beside a deadfall, rocking back and forth, wearing a red rain jacket with one sleeve torn. I called out. She looked up. It was my mother, but my mother's been dead since I was 16. She stood and walked toward me. Her voice was calm, too calm. "You're just like your father." He heard the trees too. "He never told you what happened out here." I backed away. She kept coming. The air turned sharp, cold enough to sting my lungs. She reached out and touched my face. Her fingers were ice. Then her skin peeled back like paper soaked in rain, revealing something underneath. Not muscle, not bone. Bark. She was hollow. She was a vessel. She whispered something into my mouth, not my ear, my mouth, and I felt it sink in, like smoke or ash or memory. I ran again, back through trees that now leaned so far inward, their tops touched branches, clawed at my jacket. Bells rang above me. The graves reappeared, then the cabin again. Not the same one, this time. It was waiting for me with its door open. Inside, there was a bed and a trail map on the wall. Except this map didn't show Ash Creek. It showed a place called the Mourning Pines, and every path on the map led back to the same spot. A single, unmarked clearing with the words, "This is where it ends." I didn't remember lying down, but I woke on the cabin bed. There was no warmth in the blankets, no weight in the mattress. It felt like I'd been placed there, not like I had crawled in myself. The candles were still burning. Their light barely touched the walls. Shadows danced in slow circles above me. The trail map was gone. In its place was a mirror, same as before. No frame, no backing, just the thin glass hanging by a string of red twine. I could see myself in it, only it wasn't a reflection anymore. It was a window. I was looking at myself from outside. I was in the woods, face pale, blood on my chin, pine needles caught in my beard. My lips moved, but I heard no sound. Then the mirror cracked, hairline fractures split across it, and something cold entered the room. A soundless pressure, the kind of presence you don't hear. You just know it's there. Something had stepped inside the cabin with me, not through the door, through the wood. It emerged like steam from the walls, rising in a tall, twisted shape. Not a person, not exactly. It wore the shape of a person, but everything about it was off. Too thin, too still. Its face was carved bark, and its eyes glowed faint yellow, like dying lanterns. Where its hands should have been, there were roots, slender, black, soaked in soil. It didn't speak, it only pointed toward the door, and the door opened on its own, outside. The trail was gone. Now there was only forest in every direction. Number markers, no footprints. The sky had darkened, yet no stars showed. The woods hummed like they were breathing, and they were waiting for me. I walked. I didn't know what else to do. I passed a tree that had my name carved into it again. This time the bark was bleeding. Thick sap ran down in long rivulets, dark as dried blood. I pressed my hand to it, and I felt something shift underneath the surface. The tree was alive, and it recognized me. The farther I went, the more the forest changed. Trunks bent inward at impossible angles. Stones whispered as I passed. Sometimes I'd blinkened for half a second. I'd see rows of people standing among the trees, every face familiar, every eye watching. But when I turned, they'd be gone, or worse, dash closer. At mile marker 10, I found a firewatch tower. New, no dust, no weathering. I climbed it, needing to see the world from above. to get my bearings. But when I reached the top, there was no landscape, just endless trees in every direction. But they weren't static. They pulsed, breathed, and then they moved. The forest itself shifted. Paths appeared between groves like veins in skin, and far off, just barely visible through the branches, a cabin identical to the one I left, then another, then 5 more, each one positioned like a sigil. A shape was forming. I realized it wasn't a forest at all. It was a circle, and I was trapped inside it. The Mourning Pines weren't just a name. They were a ritual. I climbed down the tower. Fast, something was coming through the trees. I could hear the branches cracking, not like something walking through them, like something walking underneath them, tunneling up. I ran east, using the moon as a guide. It was the only thing that hadn't shifted. Then I saw a light, a real light, flickering, warm. A lantern, a hiker, or so I thought. He was wearing a ranger jacket, but it wasn't a modern cut. It looked like it belonged to the 1960s, yellowed patches, torn shoulders. His eyes were glassy and wide. He smiled without blinking. "Been out here long?" he asked. I nodded, wary. "You're walking in circles," he said. "Everyone does. It's part of the ritual." "What ritual?" I asked. He laughed softly, not like a human, like a recording of laughter played on broken speakers. "You stepped off the trail," he said. "Once you do that, you're not a hiker anymore. You're a witness. And once you see the roots, they see you." He turned and walked away, deeper into the forest. I didn't follow. I turned and bolted in the opposite direction, desperate for any landmark that wasn't moving. That's when I found the final grave. It wasn't marked with a name, just a reflection. My face, staring up from the headstone like a photograph, etched into the stone. It blinked, and then it opened its mouth. "You're already buried." I fell backward, heart slamming against my ribs. My throat was raw from breathing too hard. My body felt cold from the inside out. I couldn't feel my fingers, couldn't feel my name. Then I heard the bells, thousands of them, every tree around. Me had one, and they all rang at once, not from wind, but from movement. The forest had closed. The pines were swaying in unison now. Not a storm, not wind, a rhythm, a chant. The trees were singing, and the ground beneath me cracked. A hand reached up. Through the dirt, it was mine. The skin was gray. The fingers longer than they should have been. It pulled at my boot. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The forest stole it. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the boy again, the one who whispered to me before he held a lantern, and mouthed the words, "Now you belong to the Mourning Pines." I woke up 3 days later in a ranger station. A search party had found me wandering half naked near a fire road 10 miles from the trailhead. My pack was never recovered. I had scratches in the shape of symbols down my back. My boots were filled with pine needles. My tongue was black. They ran every test. No drugs, no head trauma. I told them about the forest, about the cabins, the graves. The bells. They nodded and took notes. Then they showed me a photograph, a picture from 1983, a missing hiker named Caleb Morrow. He looked exactly like me, down to the mole on my neck. They asked if I had family in the area. I told them no, but part of me remembered. My father once hiked this same trail, and he never talked about what he saw. I think he knew. I think he made it out, but he left something behind, and now it's mine. I still hear the bells sometimes, when I close my eyes, when I sleep, and sometimes when I look in the mirror. The reflection smiles, but I'm not smiling, not anymore.